Now, this Brer Jackal, he was a real greedy fella, oh boy. He was always looking for something to fill his belly. He'd wander through the woods, across the fields, day and night, just like that. His nose was always twitching, sniffing here and there, looking for his next meal. He wasn't the Sharon type, that Brer Jackal. If he found something tasty, he'd make sure to keep it all for himself. He thought he was the smartest critter in the whole area. But sometimes being too clever, especially when greed gets involved, can get you into trouble, you know? It really can. One day, the sun was beating down something fierce, hotter than a pepper sprout. Brer Jackal, he was feeling mighty thirsty, and his tummy was rumbling with hunger too. He walked, and then all of a sudden, he saw something. A sight that made his eyes nearly pop right out of his head. Right in front of him was an old pond, but it wasn't much of a pond anymore. The water, you see, it was all gone, dried up by that blazing sun. The mud at the bottom was cracked and dry under the midday heat. To anyone else, it might have looked like a sad, forgotten place. But Brer Jackal, he saw something completely different, something that made him grin from ear to ear. In that sticky mud, there were fish, lots and lots of them. They were flipping and flopping all over the place, gasping for air. They were trying their best to find even a little bit of cool water. And there were crabs too, hundreds of them, crawling around looking real frantic. Brer Jackal, he licked his lips with his long red tongue. "Oh boy, what luck!" he shouted to himself real loud. This was his lunch, he thought, his dinner, and maybe even breakfast too. All of it, right there for the taking, without having to do any work at all. This, he figured, was his luckiest day ever. Yes sir, he sure did think so. Brer Jackal. He started to grin real big, showing off his sharp white teeth. His bushy tail wagged back and forth like a happy dog's. "All mine!" He chuckled with glee, rubbing his paws together. Not a single one will get away. He didn't spend even a second thinking about why those poor creatures were in such a fix. All he saw was a giant feast, a wonderful meal, laid out just for him. He planned to eat every single one of them, one by one, till he was stuffed. He was so happy he even did a little dance right there on the dry ground. He was already picturing those tasty fish and yummy crabs. His stomach rumbled, waiting for the delicious meal to come. Among all the crabs scuttling around, there was this one old crab. He was way smarter than he looked, that little guy, trust me. He'd seen a lot of sunrises and sunsets in his day. He watched Brer Jackal doing his little victory dance there on the dusty ground. He knew that greedy jackal planned to eat them all right then and there, in all that hot, sticky, yucky mud. So that little crab, he started thinking and thinking hard. He knew he had to do something smart and super duper fast. If not, they'd all be jackal chow, a real sad end for sure. So this wise old crab, he puffed out his chest and scuttled forward. He made his way, brave as could be, right towards that hungry jackal. He called out in his clearest voice, "Oh, Brer Jackal, sir, if you please." He spoke ever so politely, you know, so he wouldn't make the bigger animal mad. We're in a real pickle here, stuck in this awful mud. And you, well, you look mighty hungry, if I may say so. Brer Jackal stopped his dancing and looked down, a bit puzzled. "But sir," the little crab went on, his voice steady and calm, "we'd taste a whole lot better if we were a bit cleaner. This mud, you see," the crab explained, pointing with his little pincer. "It's just not good for the flavor, not at all. It makes us, well, not so yummy. It makes us all gritty and tough, and not nearly as tasty as we could be." Brer Jackal. He listened closely, tilting his head to one side. He was a greedy fellow, sure, but he wasn't a complete fool, or so he thought. He did like his food to be as delicious as possible. "There's a big, clear, beautiful lake just over that hill," the crab continued smoothly. He pointed with his pincer to a rise in the distance, painting a picture with his words. "It's full of cool, clean water, just perfect for a good wash. If you'd be so kind as to carry us all over there," the crab suggested, "we could wash all this nasty mud and dirt off our shells and scales. Then we'd be plump and juicy, the best meal you've ever had. The clever crab made it sound so tempting, so sensible. He talked about how much tastier they'd be, all fresh and clean from the lake. Br'er Jackal started to drool a little, his imagination running wild. He pictured clean, shiny fish and crabs, all ready for his feast. He licked his lips at the thought of such a delicious meal. The crab waited patiently, hoping his words had hit the mark. Br'er Jackal. He thought about what the crab said for maybe a minute or two. Nice fish and fat crabs sure sounded a whole lot tastier. "All right, old crab," he finally said, nodding his head. "You've got a smart head on your shoulders for such a little fella. I'll do it. I'll carry all of you to that nice lake you talked about." So he started gathering up all the wiggling fish and crawling crabs. He carefully put them on his big back, trying not to hurt them too much. After all, he wanted them fresh and lively for his big feast. The little crab, hidden among the others, smiled a tiny secret smile to himself. His clever plan was working out just as he'd hoped. Br'er Jackal, huffing and puffing, started up the dusty hill. Carrying all those fish and crabs wasn't easy. No, sir, it wasn't. The load was heavy, and the sun was still beating down something fierce. But the thought of that yummy, fresh meal kept him going one step at a time. Finally, he made it to the top of the hill, all out of breath. And there it was, spread out below him, a big, beautiful, sparkling lake. The water was so clear and blue you could see right down to the sandy bottom. It looked cool and inviting, the perfect spot for a wash and a meal. Br'er Jackal was mighty pleased with himself for being so smart to listen. Just as they reached the water's edge, it happened. The wise old crab gave a little wiggle, a secret signal only they knew. "Now everyone!" he shouted as loud as his little voice could. And quicker than you could blink an eye or snap your fingers, they moved. All those fish, they flopped and jumped with all their might. All those crabs, they scrambled and splashed, their little legs ablur. Into the cool, clear, wonderful water they all went. Splash! Down to the bottom of the lake they swam, disappearing from Br'er Jackal's sight. The wise crab was the last one in, giving Br'er Jackal a cheeky little wave. Br'er Jackal, he just stood there, his mouth wide open, not believing his eyes. He couldn't believe his eyes, not for a second. 1 minute, he had a huge feast piled on his back. The next, all he had was a wet back and an empty belly. He was mad, I tell you, madder than a hornet stuck in a jug. He stomped his foot hard on the ground and howled his anger at the sky. "You tricked me!" he yelled at the now empty water, his voice hoarse with anger. "You sneaky, no-good tricksters! I'll get every last one of you back for this!" His wonderful meal had swum away, leaving him hungry and very, very angry. Way down at the bottom of the cool lake, the fish and the crabs, well, they heard all the fuss. They heard Br'er Jackal yelling and stomping his feet like mad on the shore. They saw him and his new gang, looking super scary right there at the edge of the water. Oh boy, they knew they were in a real pickle now. They sure did. That Br'er Jackal, he was one stubborn critter when he set his mind on something. The wise old crab, he knew they needed extra help. Way more help than he alone could give. "We gotta find the old one," he told the other worried lake animals. "The wise old turtle. The one who lives way, way down at the bottom of this lake. He's the only one who can save us from Br'er Jackal's nasty, scary plan." You see, this wise old turtle, he was super, super old. Older than the oldest trees you can imagine. He'd been living in that lake for longer than anyone, and I mean anyone, could remember. He'd seen everything, absolutely everything that ever happened in and around that lake. And he knew pretty much everything too. He didn't say a whole lot, that old turtle, but when he did talk, every single animal in the lake listened up real close. He was huge, and he moved kinda slow with green slimy stuff like moss growing all over his big giant shell. But his eyes, Oh, his eyes were as sharp as pins and just full of old, quiet smarts. Yeah, full of old, quiet smarts. So the fish and the crabs, they all swam down to his calm and quiet spot, down to his home at the dim bottom of the lake, really hoping he could help them out. They needed help, and fast. The wise old turtle was the only chance they had left. The wise old turtle listened to their whole scary story super patiently, from the very start to the very end. He blinked his old heavy eyes real slow, just soaking it all in. Then he spoke. And his voice, it sounded like big rocks rumbling around underwater. He told them, "Don't you worry," he said. "I've got a plan." He started to swim, slow and steady like a king, up to the bright top of the lake, right where Brer Jackal and his buddies were just about to start their big, messy digging. The turtle came up out of the water looking bigger and scarier than any turtle ever. Way bigger than any turtle they'd ever seen or even dreamed of. Then he let out this giant roar. It was so loud it shook the ground. A sound that was super loud and super scary. That awful sound, it made the leaves on the trees tremble and the water splash around. Brer Jackal and his gang, they'd never ever heard a sound so frightening in their whole lives. They looked up and saw this giant scary monster, roaring its head off, coming right out of the lake. Its eyes looked like they were glowing, and its shadow stretched way out onto the bank. They didn't stick around to find out what it was or what it wanted. No, sir. They turned tail and ran for their lives as fast as their little legs could zoom. Brer Bear, he tumbled right over Brer Wolf. They were in such a rush. And Brer Jackal, he ran the fastest of everybody, yelping and whining the whole way. They didn't stop running, not even for a second, until they were far, far, far away from that lake. And from that day on, Brer Jackal never, ever, ever came near that lake to bother those animals again. And all the animals, the ones in the lake and the ones in the woods too, they all looked up to that wise old turtle. They respected him more than ever, all because he was so smart and so brave.